back to Spiral Revival. I am doing a video for the first time, so if you're not watching the video and you feel called, there is a video for this one for the first time in a really long time. And I'm tuning in here, having just gotten back from a journey to my homeland, the country I was made and born in, Panama. And it was a beautiful journey with my mother where we did some bureaucratic stuff and then also some beautiful adventures, and my heart is full and raw, and I'm settling back into my home space. And well, I'm really grateful because my partner, while I was gone, transformed this little area behind my little tiny home into this beautiful hangout spot. So now I have a place to sit and record these videos in a beautiful space and setting. And I'm so grateful. I literally fell to the ground in tears when he showed it to me. And it's just a total transformation. It's crazy what just a bit of intention and some materials can do. So I'm really grateful to be coming and sitting here, grounding into some of the thoughts that I've been having the past month, 2 months. This episode is not a single topic, but a journey and dance through some philosophical thoughts and poetry, maybe, that were coming through during my travels through Italy this July. It was a very Atlantean, Venusian, energetic extravaganza, and I am then going to tune into some wisdom, some information, and report it here live about where I believe Atlantis is located here on Earth, because it's some information that I've been following for a couple years, more like 3 years now. And yeah, after the last super play gathering in Laguna Beach in the canyon, which Laguna here where I live is a Venusian anchor point here on Earth, and we had a super play called Remembering Atlantis, dedicated to just getting together and tuning into the intention of our Aquarian roots of, what is or what was Atlantis and the Lumerians, the Lyrans, and just this Venusian aquatic energy. So we got together and shared poetry, shared remembered dreams, memories, intuitions, images, and wisdom, and it brought forth a lot of downloads. So I'll then go into what I shared with the group there and some of the downloads that came through with that group collective research that we conducted together, which was extremely beautiful, and I'm so grateful that we had the opportunity to experience that together. I guess I could begin just diving into a sweet little poem that came through when I was in Lake Como. That is a very interesting place because the shape of it is almost like a triskel. There's 3 like arms or limbs of this lake, and it's like a triple spiral. So here's a poem that I wrote in that space. Open-hearted, new environment my substance, ecstasy's jornata, a bearing witness to duckling kinship. I play where there is a lion's laughter. Lapping waves pull my heartbeat faster, living on the edge of joyful laughter always. It is impossible until it is easy. Let all the beautiful words and images pour through, not impede me. With so much beauty it overwhelms my breathing. Central sistema nerviosa, ritmo circadian, managerial imposing. Y hasta cuando? Ya cuando? Suono d'oro, and faint recollection, remembering of astral journeys. Frustration with my eloquence, prayer for clarity, for thee shall not receive lest I nurture crystallinity. Mountain ranges of dragon, deer, and hogs, Pegasus journey through the winding crests which lay this lake, collection of vitality, joining along the shore, fulfilling human prophecy for life. I would be curious to hear what images that could have brought for you in your mind's eye, if you feel called to share with me. So, the first concept is one that maybe you might have heard from me before and has been a part of my work for a while now. And that is the concept of the Phantasial Renaissance. It is related to my last podcast with Mark Smith, which was quick, short, but extremely potent and inspiring, and wordsmithery magic going on. So the Phantasial Renaissance is a concept that I keep playing with and working with, and is the basis of all my work. It revolves around world building, myth making, dream weaving, and viewing ourselves as citizens of our own inner worlds. So I'll just read this journal entry, which was kind of just a further crystallinification of this concept, and let it be a gem that can land in your court and blossom into whatever it may. Each of us, as a citizen of our inner worlds, may we take the time to flesh out and enliven our inner worlds. May we take the time to develop the technical skills to best express these attributes. Each of us a musician, poet, fashionista, culinary, linguist, dancer, actor, and artist, eager to collect stories from other planets. Each of us a representative of the internal landscapes from which we come here from. We've developed the skills to transmit the sounds, aesthetics, smells, tastes, and language of our lands, storytellers of legends bestowed in this way only to us. I am Alai Margarita, Milacqua Malaika del Mare, Zela Starshine, from the seven seas and the island of Z, and what an honor it is to be here with you all on planet Terre. When we meet each other, it is not a matter of if we are or are not musicians, but what it sounds like. What does our music sound like? Not if we know how to dance, but what kind of energy we do work with. And we see this in the oversaturation of the music industry. I like to see it as a democratization of the music industry, of the whole art industry, as now everyone is able to create and share music and art. The only thing that is truly losing power here is the power of the idol and the generation of money. But the individual artist has only gained power through the accessibility of tools, instruments, technologies, softwares, and platforms for sharing. We no longer work for impersonal corporations. We practice our crafts and fine-tune our rhythms. We rejoice in each other's uniqueness. I dress, eat, sing, speak, and play as a citizen of the realms in which I reside, and we can get to know other cultures of other dimensions through its people. And as long as we have the intention to uncover our own cultures and artifacts to share with each other, there will be many beings. As treasured portals we may explore. Rainbow bridges, spiral stairways, holy doors. May we do our part in collecting many treasures more, for everything we experience gets added to the records of our grand venture on Terre. Thank you for listening. This is a concept very dear and special to my heart, and the nature of it is a decentralized system, a sociocratic cooperative system, and so I share it here now with you and all you listening and receiving it here. to be a sense of inspiration and to take it and develop it and to incorporate it into your work and your art and being. I know it's not a new idea, but I guess that's the point, is that we all, in a way, as we develop our own perspectives of this world from the lens of our inner universes, we each have unique perspectives on the same ideas, or can bring forth a totally new perspective. And the more we share them, we can weave in new perspectives from our friends and members of our community into our own, weaving a beautiful patchwork tapestry of concepts, models, and ultimately bringing depth to our understanding of the world, breadth and depth and omnidimensionality. Beyond just a set parameter of what we're supposed to believe as a hippie or a conservative or whatever nationality or religion we may come from. And I think that the concept of the democratization of the music industry specifically, because I think that that's a really clear example of how this has happened, but in all creative industries, we hear or maybe feel this sense of like, why would I even put the effort to make music? Like the era of these big legendary stars is over. Like there will never be another here's the point where I like pick an example. I don't know, another Michael Jackson or Jimi Hendrix or Bjork. It's so much more. Oh, there's a big, beautiful butterfly. It's so much more. Because back in the day, things were just so different. Like stardom would happen through the radio and through the newspaper and through the TV and records and flyers, and to make it in that way, is like getting signed to a label, and it's like you're one of the only ones who got signed to this label, and like whoever's there like makes it big. And now with social media, it's just and accessibility to the programs that allow you to create music, people are able to create music that would only be able to be made in a massive studio on their iPhones now. And this can on some level be extremely discouraging, because it's like, why would I even put the energy into creating art, into trying, if it's way harder to reach that level now? And the switch of perspective on that is that back then the resources were extremely limited, and now they're extremely abundant. And truly what the intention to create art and to create music for sharing, that is more accessible than ever, and that's something I think that we can, with a shift of perspective, celebrate and rejoice in, that now we can all be musicians. And in a way, like, that's what was negative in that old perspective, is like, well, everyone's a musician, so why does it even matter? Everyone can do that now. And switching it to the joy and celebration of that accessibility, and that we get to hear, like, there's a potentiality to be able to hear the kind of music that our friends and community create. It's like a whole new way of communicating and sharing our soul, And imagine if everyone we met had their own albums and songs that we could get to know them through and appreciate. And it's just a shift from, I think, a more capitalistic mindset of the prophet or the idol archetype becoming an idol, and it brings it more to like a balanced playing field, where of course like some may rise higher than others, but it's more of like a wave movement. So here's a few thoughts that came through in Florence. We don't know all that we do not know. We do know that humans have destroyed each other's history during conflict. We only know things like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon existed because of written descriptions. There are many things we knew existed, yet have no physical trace on Earth. We can safely deduce that there is much that was, yet is no longer, and there are no writings or understandable references of that remain, leaving many mysteries. For example, ISIS is currently or has recently destroyed the winged bull men in Iraq, a clear example of the destruction of history as a war mechanism against a different people. Beyond physical objects, tools, buildings, or writings, such as the mechanisms used to create and move massive single stone columns and blocks in ancient Rome, or the pyramids, are the unknown energetic technologies. We may have depictions of certain objects, but we don't know how to plug them in, so to speak, so they remain dead objects, like someone discovering an iPhone in the future may just see a black rectangle with functional use but never turn it on. The energetic and metaphysical capabilities of the past humans and civilizations are unknown to us experientially. Similarly, I noticed that European cities are cohabiting and existing within an ancient matrix. They live daily amongst ancient structures and mysterious building techniques, Renaissance art depicting a divinity, impeccable engravings on gargantuan temples, mythically decorated gates and gardens and holy doors, yet they are not active participants in this creation. Living amongst it is beneficial in its own right, but there is a mystery, a forgotten aspect. We could not recreate this level of engineering married to artistry, with no use of fossil fuels, because we are entranced by industry. Quantity over quality. We're out of love with our world, with the mystery of the divine. We don't care, and we don't have a reason or the faith to do such an effort, such a feat. The next thought came through when I was eating brunch and saw a pigeon with hair that had tied one of its feet unusable and cutting off its circulation, and it was a horrible sight and I couldn't do anything about it, and it sparked some thoughts. Seeing a pigeon with tied up feet due to human hair sparked the thought that it could be karmic shackles, a pattern of immobility, suffering, suppression of the hands, starting in this or a previous lifetime, and it made me wonder if that soul ever incarnated as a human who would still carry that wound or trauma, what would that look like? It seems unlikely that they would ever understand that they were once a pigeon with a tied up foot, because their lifetime as a pigeon is such a foreign experience, a totally alternative experienced reality, uncompatible with the human mind, sensation only, fear, pain. For the marks left on the soul print would be storyless, and humans add stories, create them, we rationalize what has happened to us and why, but the pigeon doesn't understand that it's shackled by human hair, it simply experiences what that's like. So there's no space for a story to remember, just the sensations. And I wonder how much of our soul lineage lies hidden beyond the realm of the intelligible, for the simple reason that it occurred while we ourselves weren't intelligible. So, yeah, it sparked the thoughts that, sometimes, you or someone you know, or maybe you've heard the plane overhead. Somebody may be mentioning like, oh, I have a soul link to knives, or like I don't know, I'll use myself as an example. Like, I have stabbed and sliced my hands many times, and so it's like, okay, is there a karmic link with like my hands getting cut off or something. You know, there could be that rationality of like a story building, or, you know, somebody saying that they have a fear of something, or maybe their voice, it feels suppressed, their throat chakra is closed because they were once burned at the stake as a witch for speaking their truth. And so these stories that we build, but then it could be something as like simple or unbeknownst as, you know, maybe once we were, and I realize that it might not be as linear, and that it's extremely complex and unintelligible. But like, just the simple thought, maybe it's that we were a pigeon who experienced the suffering and pain of like having a shackled limb and not being able to do anything about it, and just experiencing that in an extremely animalistic way, with no story, no narrative, no logical understanding of what's happening, just the presence and the experience of that. And if that could bleed into other lifetimes that, you know, potentially do gain self-consciousness and self-awareness. I'm also assuming this pigeon doesn't have self-awareness. Totally good. If we, you know, like, what that would be, and like, maybe there's a trauma around the hand and like being shackled, but there's, you know, like no intelligible recollection or understanding of that. It would take, I think, some really deep work and practice. The next thought is called lotus traps, and it came through while speaking with the dear sister Uni. And we were pondering the lotus traps. I titled it Lotus Traps because of the ancient lotus city in Greek myth, where ultimately the idea is that, I mean, you might remember in Percy Jackson when they go to the casino and like eat these things, and it just turns into this like trippy, like energetic trap. And so this is how the lotus city worked, is like supposedly there was an island that if you got there and ate their food, which is a deep mythological symbolism of like eating the food of the place and getting trapped there, if you ate their lotus flower, you would kind of just enter this like bliss, ignorant bliss state that would keep you trapped on this island. And that is the delusional point. So, speaking with Uni on the phone, we began talking about a spiritual trap, a hippie trap, the belief that we can just sing and sit in circle and drink cacao and wait for blessings to arrive, that this indulgence is exploited by forces which would like to keep starseeds out of their power. It's exploited in the growth of New Age capitalism, seen in Tulum, Bali, Shasta, Sedona, etc., when people are only experiencing bliss as cacao circles, ceremony, music festivals, ecstatic dance, singing and dancing, meditating. They are passive, inactive. By feeding that indulgence, one could prevent many angels from fully coming online. These activities are beneficial once we integrate and activate in our daily earthly lives. Many get lost along the way, and what's worse is that when people begin participating in New Age spiritual colonialism by going to the jungle or forests and creating spiritual centers for their dancing and ceremonies, they don't understand that the beach, the jungle, the forest, the mountain is the spiritual center, not strengthening and giving focus to the present spirituality and ritual before imposing their own. It is extremely problematic and negligent. So, starting off, there's this point that, you know, I love cacao circles, and I love ecstatic dance, and I love music festivals, and I'm sure I would enjoy traveling to every single one of the places I mentioned. The idea is that in experiencing these places, it becomes clear that there are individuals who can stay stuck in that cycle and just go from one to the other, and even get stuck in a scarcity point because we're not working real jobs or developing a practical means of home or rootedness. And I mean, I live a very nomadic life, so it's not talking down on that. But ultimately, it can create a very vulnerable person or sense of being or state that doesn't feel vulnerable, and you don't notice the alarm bells going off in our bodies because we're filling it with bliss. And it ultimately turns a very potentially positive transformative experience and process into a Luciferian false light agreement and contract that could very well be used to exploit angels and starseeds and bright beings, awakened beings, and keep them from fully like stepping into their active role, where when we're active, when we're integrated, when we're here and rooted and present, that's when we're able to make a deep actual impact in the world and be warriors for this earth and for the new age and for new systems. And when we're here, we're studying, we're with community, having like developing our eloquence, developing our skills and our crafts to create art and offerings for each other. That's when we're the most powerful. So we were saying that people could potentially, or forces, powers that be of the New Age capitalist movement could potentially be exploiting and pushing and wanting more of this, you know, more music festivals and consciousness transcendental experiences for the masses to actually keep people offline, keep people in a blissed out, ignorant haze, and keep them from actually getting their feet on the ground, keep them living in their car, keep them nomadic, keep them offline, not just on the actual internet sense, but like in your body, keeping us out of our body because we're so blissed out. So there's that double-edged sword there. And then going into the like spiritual centers, you know, I was very disappointed. I'm from Panama and grew up in Costa Rica as well. And I visited my hometown in Costa Rica this past year and was just like shocked at how many people had come in and like just want to create and bring ecstatic dance and cacao circles like everywhere. And it's like, why don't you just tune into what's already going on here in this community and the way that we celebrate and keep it bioregional, like keep it local and artisanal to what this land wants and what the locals and the people here want and the way that they celebrate and rejoice, instead of just, you know, it's almost like a extremely covert, it is a covert imperialism, spiritual colonialism, and it's so subtle and easy to be ignorant of yourself in that way, and the way that we contribute to it, that it's hard to talk about it face on, because it's like, what? No, we're here for love, and we're like sustainable, and we're including indigenous communities, and all of that is happening. So it's a little bit confusing, but it's important to point out where there is wrong and what is damaging to the overall community. Yeah, I remember mentioning to a few people like that I'm from Panama and that I live in this, like I'm rooted into this small town down there, and 2 times I had people say, "Oh, is there community down there?" And it just really, I was like, I didn't know how to respond, because it's like there is a community down there. There is a community down there that is rooted and has been there for a really long time. But I know, like, what do you mean, really? Because I have a sense you mean, are there other people from the United States, Canada, Europe down there having ecstatic dances and cacao? I think that's what you mean by community. So, no, they're not there yet. And I'm really glad that that's the case, because there is a community down there which doesn't really need that. And it's just interesting to like really realize that that's going on. I mean, look, it's obvious, and maybe for some people it's like, yeah, duh, like this is why I don't hang out with anyone like that. But like when you really do feel the positive impact of all of these things, it's just interesting because I know none of these people mean harm. And it's interesting to see how these ideologies or feelings and sentiments can kind of like sneak into a community, or what can be perceived as something beautiful and positive, and often really is, can kind of like get hijacked or distorted. And just having a little radar for those things. Amen. This thought came in Faenza, which is in the countryside, at this beautiful little glamping Airbnb that I had the honor of staying in and just enjoying and reading and being in the sunlight. And I was being bothered by a bug and swatted it away, and then these thoughts came through. So our will to provide for and defend ourselves may appear conflictory, yet are ultimately one. So as a mosquito comes to harvest my blood, which would be it providing for itself, I feel a sharp pain and immediately am alerted, so I shoo the fly away, which is me defending myself. The mosquito is moved by its sense of providing, and I am moved by my own defense. And though nature has equipped the mosquito with the capability to provide for itself, it has also provided me with a way to defend myself, and in other circumstance, the mosquito is equipped to defend itself. In this context, it may be said that we have equal endowments, or maybe equal will of our endowments, more or less. Nature is not preferring either of us by minimizing either of our instincts so that the other may not defend and the other may not provide. I am still bit and the mosquito is still shooed off by me. So this is just the pondering and of like, you know, the universe or nature is endowing us all with our will to survive, and it's not evidently rooting for one or another. It's existing through all of us, yet we're kind of combating and overcoming each other in the predator-prey or parasite host relationships. Going a step further, this will to survive ultimately is not something equally or uniquely bestowed by nature. But as we are nature, these capabilities emerge through our own will to survive. Thus, our will to survive is nature's will to survive and thrive. Further reflection from my partner is seen in the predator-prey relationship, where a lion appears bad to the impala. Yet without the lion, the impala would not be as fast or alert and would likely kill itself by overgrazing and depleting its own food source. So on the grand scale, it is obvious that the lion is imperative to the impala. Both the lion and the impala's will to survive ultimately form the regenerative dynamic which allows life to continue for their whole ecosystem and landscapes as a whole, progressing the universal collective evolutionary process. So that was just a really interesting realization and comprehension, which is that one conclusion, our will to survive, everyone's will to survive is ultimately nature's will to survive, because we are all natural, we are all nature, and even though we're like beating each other and eating each other and shooing each other away and keeping each other from food because maybe we are the food that they want, that is just like, even though it might appear on that one level to be combative and conflictory and like competitive, ultimately we're all nature. So everyone's will to survive in that vision is nature's will to survive. Then seeing it in the example from a slightly different perspective of the predator and prey is that the impala may see the lion as its enemy and that it's destroying it, and that's on the individual level. But without the lion, the impala would not be able to exist because it wouldn't be moving, it wouldn't be as alert, it would overgraze and run out of its own food source and die. So that relationship is basically what allows everyone to survive, and kind of blew my mind a little bit. Lovely. So those are just some thoughts and ponders that I hope find you well and inspire thee to process and hold them and integrate them into your mind garden, or throw them out if they don't resonate. And yes. So now we can transition into the Atlantean energies that came through. First of all, there were a lot of interesting aquatic energies going on with this event. I felt called to do this event because there were myself and some sisters and beings on this earth were experiencing a lot of like messages and dreams about Lumerian, Atlantean energies, Lyran, Venusian energies, which are all connected. And myself and a sister, we had a dream on the same night about like an island that needed help and like trying to sound alarm bells, but being told, like, being kept from that, trying to save women and children from this island, but like men in suits keeping us from doing so. And so it was like, okay, there's this like, does Atlantis need help? Like, what's going on? And then Maui fires broke out and devastated Lahaina. And it's incredibly tragic, and it feels like it could have been part of that message. And it just led me to wonder, like, okay, if that is what was coming through in these dreams, like, what are we supposed to do? How, like, or are we just supposed to know? And tuning into that. And so we picked a date for this event to just get together and talk about our memories, our collective memories and wisdom, knowledge, intuitions with Venusian, Lyran, Lemurian, Atlantean, aquatic, ancient race beings, and see what happens. And we picked the date. A month goes by, and it turns out in the middle of summer, that is when Hurricane Hillary is going to be hitting California, and it would be flooding and raining all day. And we were going to be talking about the ancient flooding of Atlantis and water civilizations. And so that was mind-blowing, and we postponed, even though it would have been pretty lit, I think, to meet in the rain and the storm and just like be with it. Ultimately, I'm really glad that we moved the date a week later and we got together, and it was so incredibly moving and beautiful to witness everyone in their voice, in their artistry, in their sharing, in their vulnerability and softness. And that's what Superplay is for, and it's so great to connect with community in that setting. My dear sister Dev Smith made us a beautiful, beautiful spread of Venusian goodies, and she's a Taurus, so that energy really came through. And yeah, I shared, when everyone arrived, I shared some information about why we were gathering, and ultimately gave a little download for the collective to do with what we will. And it's ultimately about the Rikat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania, northwest Africa, and how I fully believe that that is where the capital city of Atlantis resided, and it just makes sense. So I'm gonna go over why it just makes sense. It's not like it's pressing information, but I feel like there's always articles and information coming out about like any sunken city or sunken artifacts in the ocean are like, we found Atlantis. And it's like, did you even read Plato's accounts of what Atlantis was like or what? Because it's not just like sunken city. There's a lot more to that. So, but I think it's like, could potentially be in, I mean, we know how the archaeological community is. They don't really like new information or adjusting what they believed to be true, and they claim that is fully pseudo-scientific or pseudo-historical, whatever, and that it was not real, and that Plato just used it as an example or a metaphor. But it's like, he stated, I mean, I studied philosophy, not like that makes me a master, but he would state when things were metaphors or allegories, like the allegory of the cave or the allegory of the sun, and he did not say that with Atlantis. That being said, he wrote this account of Atlantis in the Timaeus, and the intention of writing it was for a talk that he was giving at an event in Greece, Rome. That, like I said, I'm not an expert, but for a festival celebrating the goddess Athena. So it's cool because like the goddess energy brings through the celebration of Athena, like brought us the information of Atlantis, because we wouldn't have known anything if he didn't make this talk for Athena. So basically, this is a brief on Plato's description of Atlantis. He received this knowledge orally from his great-grandfather, who received this information from a man called Solon, who lived 300 years before Plato, and traveled to Egypt, where he received the history of Atlantis from priests that were worshippers of the goddess Neith in her temple. So again, the goddesses are bringing forth the information of Atlantis. Plato wrote this account of Atlantis to be shared at a festival in the honor of the goddess Athena. Atlantis, based on his account, supposedly existed 9,000 years before Plato, so an estimated 11,500 years ago from today. He describes that the civilization of Atlantis consisted of a series of islands of concentric circles, so rings of land, water, land, water, land. It possessed 10,000 chariots, advanced technologies, a series of complex canals, and a vast number of bull and elephants. The soil was rich. The abundant agriculture was produced in the plains area of the island, which made use of the sophisticated irrigation systems. So it would have existed 11,500 years ago, and evidently was a massive, vibrant, highly technologically advanced civilization. So I'm going to see like how long ago was Sumeria. Okay, so Sumeria started around 5000 BC. So that's not even 11,500 years ago. So this would have been before Sumeria. So Plato then describes the inhabitants of Atlantis as being half human and half god. Big deal. And of great wisdom and spiritual enlightenment, as well as possessing advanced technologies. According to Plato, Atlantis reached so advanced technologies still in terms of them then. So 300 years later, what Atlantis was doing was advanced. According to Plato, Atlantis reached its demise around 9,600 BC. Sumer, one of the first civilizations ever, started 5000 BC. The nation destroyed itself as a result of the irreverent use of dangerous supernatural powers. The nation destroyed itself as a result of the irreverent use of dangerous supernatural powers. Shortly after its failed attempt of conquering Athens, a series of earthquakes sunk Atlantis into the ocean, completely wiping it off the face of the earth. So, shortly after its failed attempt of conquering Athens, this shows that Atlantis, and it's talked about that Atlantis was like an empire that was expanding and had subcolonies throughout the world, and that the Atlantis that we talk about is like the capital city. In his quote, he says that in a single day and night, Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. The cataclysm was created by the gods in response to the Atlanteans growing materialistic with a lack of reverence, and in a single cataclysmic night, they sent fire and earthquakes that made Atlantis sink into the ocean, completely destroying their civilization. So this tells a story of beings that were highly advanced and in deep reverence with the earth and deep communion with the earth, and then the archetype of empire, of colonialism set in, and the belief that we are God and we can control our environment set in, and this the holding of these powers was condemned by the power. So a few hours later, here we are. I had a friend come and we had tea and had a lovely time, and now I'm back to finish what we were talking about. So, like I mentioned, according to Plato, Atlantis reigned over all of Libya, all the way to Egypt's boundaries. As a result, Atlantis had to be west of Libya, and Libya itself had to be part of the Atlantean domain. So if you look on a map, which I'll put in the video version, and I think I'll probably make a post about it as well, so you can see, if you look at a map, the Eye of the Sahara is located to the west of Libya, and they're both in the more northern region of Africa, so that checks out. He additionally says that the Atlanteans mined white, black, and red stones for use in their construction. The Ricot area is full of black and red and white stones in its land. Plato says that Atlantis had an abundance of copper and gold, and Mauritania, as a country today, its #1 exports are in copper and gold. Atlantis is described as consisting of concentric circles, 3 of water and 2 of land. And as you can see in the images, this is what the Ricot structure looks like. It's archaeologists say that it's a natural occurrence, and if you look at it, it definitely doesn't look like it. There's nothing else like it in the world, and the circles are pretty perfect. Also, I don't have the numbers here, but Plato does say the width of the diameter of these concentric circles, and if you look at the Eye of the Sahara, that is pretty much exactly the size. The well near the center Acropolis provided the city with fresh water, Plato says, and it was said to be created by Poseidon in the center island, a well of fresh water, even though the water table around the Ricot structure is salt water. And in the center island of the Ricot, there is a flowing freshwater spring, despite the salt water tables, which also that does indicate that that area was at one point under the ocean or much closer to the shore than it is today. Atlantis is described to have had mountain ranges to the north with rivers of fresh water flowing, which match with the mountain ranges just north of the Ricot structure, with evidence of rivers that used to flow straight towards it. Plato says that Atlantis opened to the sea at the south, and so does the Ricot structure. Though this gets into the way that it was destroyed. The Ricot structure now in today's Africa is quite further from the shore, but the shore is just west of it. And the idea is that there was a massive flood that started kind of from like the Mediterranean Sea area, and you can see it on a map of Africa. What is now the Saharan desert used to be green, and we know that. And if you look at it on a map, you see the striations of water flowing across that whole landscape. And the sands of the Saharan desert do come from the ocean. That is known to be true. So that's the idea. Plato says that Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night from fire, earthquakes, and floods. And this is where it gets really interesting. There was a climate catastrophe event called the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe, which was 11,500 years ago. And that's exactly how long ago Plato says that Atlantis was destroyed. The Younger Dryas was a massive global climate change and extinction event with global fires and drastic sea level changes. So that's what happened, which is crazy. It was believed to be caused by a comet, which also aligns with the belief that Atlantis was destroyed and orchestrated by the higher celestial powers. So, with that information, I am pretty convinced that that matches up to be where the Atlantean capital was. And like I mentioned, that would be the capital city for a larger empire. And intuitively, with information that I've gathered and connections that I have linked, I believe that it makes sense that there were subcolonies throughout Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Caribbean. Prior beings that were inhabiting now Atlantis are known to be the Lumerians. So there's the idea that the Lumerians were the original high consciousness beings that brought forth this advanced technology in union with the earth to be able to like create something like this and be in communion with the gods. And then maybe there was like a hijacking into like an Atlantean empire, and that's why there was that like disillusion that brought forth its destruction. This is what the pieces seem to be connecting. Yeah, so possible exploitation of their sacred knowledge. In the community of people who are more well versed, Lumerians are said to be connected to dragons and draconian energy, which is exciting because I love dragons, and the dragon energy is just like a very potent energy that I feel like those with it are just born with it, and we feel the dragons. And they're a very strong and mighty force. I also was thinking about the idea where it's like Lumerians, which it's really interesting. The concept of Lumerians came from Helena Blavatsky, who is the founder of Theosophy. So Theosophy is a school of thought from the late 1800s that was developed by Helena Blavatsky, and it's a conglomeration, a collection of like occult knowledge, the world's religions, and the world's sciences, and bringing it all together to create certain like theories about how the world works. They worked a lot with the spiral, with the cycles of 7, which is something that I work with as well and has come through me. In my book, I go deeper into that, and that's just reality. And Helena Blavatsky, if you don't recognize that name, you might recognize the artist Helma af Klint. Helma af Klint was studying Theosophy, and the ideas in her paintings that were revolutionary at the time were stemming from her studies of Theosophy. And so Helena Blavatsky had this theory of the 7 root races of the human lineage, and like how our cycles through these races and progress through these races symbolize like the evolution of humanity in general. And the Lumerians were a certain race, and they were described to like live a long time, be androgynous, and be in communion with the elements, not need to eat food, surviving off of sunlight. And it makes me think like, okay, if these are ancient prior to human beings, and like there's this problem with finding artifacts from that time, like really, really ancient times, is it possible that these are memories of like a plant kingdom existence or elemental kingdom existence? Because androgynous beings that survive off of sunlight, that live a really long time, that feels to me like an algae or a plant. And it could be very possible that we have these tales of these ancient beings embedded in our DNA that we can only understand in human form, or maybe we like are having memories of what it really was like to live in that kingdom, the elemental or plant kingdoms, and it comes through in these stories. Just thinking about the possibility of that. I also, when I was in Italy, was in Venice. And Venice, Venus is a connection point, anchor point of Venus on Earth. And something that I noticed when you get there, like it is the land of the winged lion symbol because of Saint Mark, whose body was stolen from Egypt and brought there. And that was his symbol from the Bible. So there's like golden statues and images of these winged lions everywhere. And the lion is the Lyran energy, and that's how it comes through. Lyrans are really connected to Venus and are said to have a connection to the essence and the origins of Lemurian races and therefore Atlantean energy. So it's interesting how that comes through. And I've been feeling that there's a connection in the Caribbean as well. And that's when I learned that my country where I'm from, Venezuela, got its name from Italians who came and named it Veneziola, like Little Venice. Because of the indigenous people they came across were living on stilted houses in the ocean and were water people, knowing how to fish and swim and living in really deep communion with the water and the oceans. And when you go there, like in Jamaica and the Caribbean, there is the lion as well, the Lion of Jah, which also comes from Africa, and Africa being the cradle of kings and where Atlantean origins are from. So that like thread is really interesting to me. It's interesting how it presents itself. I feel like the Lyran energy really presents itself and lets itself be known, and like it's that it wants to like leave its mark, and it does. Because they presented themselves to me in a dream and let themselves be known that way. And I've heard other people have similar experiences and a deep connection to water in that way. Like in my dream, I was sitting in a stream when I received the information, and a friend was, I think, by a river in their dream as well when the Lyrans came to them. So those things all present themselves as information, and that's why I think it's so interesting to share that information, because it validates unknown, unseen worlds that we might not really bring into our conscious expression in this earthly plane. And I think bringing it out and talking about it can bring it up in each other, and it's like, oh, whoa, like that makes sense and that resonates, and maybe I had a dream or a memory that connects to that. That's like the connections that came through and that I shared. And after the event, an obvious thing that came through was that we, in today's age, maybe might hold a concept that like when we're talking about star seeds or different lineages, thinking like, oh, I'm of the Palladians and I'm of the Lyrans and I'm of the Atlanteans and I'm of the Lemurians, and realizing that all of us as humans are aquatic beings because our planet is mainly ocean water. And somebody brought it to my attention that the percentage of land to water on the earth is really similar, and reflection of the ratio of body versus water in our bodies. And so the earth is a reflection of us and our bodies, and this is our earth. As earthlings, this is our planet, and the planet is an ocean planet, a water planet. And so ultimately, we're all water people. This is part of our origins as humans in general. It's not necessarily like, oh, I'm Aquarian and you're not. You know, of course, some of us have deeper connections to these elements than others, but it was just kind of a realization and an acknowledgement that just being human in general is like, oh, this is a part of our whole lineage, is whatever they were called and whatever subcultures or places, like we are ultimately an aquatic race. And that felt really good to just acknowledge, because sometimes we can get caught up in the names and the logistics and the mappings and models, and they're so helpful, and at the same time it's good to release them and to let them flow and let them lose meaning and let them come back. So I feel like this is a really good place to just bring it in and close. It's funny, as I said that the camera stopped for filming, and that feels good. I'm seeing a beautiful sunset right now and feel like my heart is full and I'm grounding back into my space after a long trip. I hope that this episode has found you well wherever you may be and has hopefully been interesting. I love you, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your time today or tonight. And yeah, I'll see you again. Talk